everybody, my name is Sheila, or SL Reads, and this is my August wrap-up and July TBR. This is my first time doing one of these videos. I unfortunately only read 2 books this month, which is a really small number for me. Usually I read a lot, but I've been in a bit of a reading slump recently, and I found that there wasn't really anything that I wanted to read. My reading slump has really been going on since the beginning of July, so I didn't really read that many books in that month, and I was kind of getting out of it by the end of July or so, I thought, but I ended up not really reading anything. I started a few books, and I've already had some books that I've been reading for a while, but haven't been able to make that much of a dent into, but unfortunately, none of these really captivated my interest this month, so I only did get to these 2 books, but I really loved both of them. And so the first book that I read this month is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. I love this book. I talked about it in my most recent book haul. So this book follows Monty, who is the son of an earl in England, and he's going on his grand tour of Europe, which is essentially where rich people would just go off and tour all the biggest cities of Europe and kind of party, have some fun, go to lots of interesting things, and learn a lot before they came back to their real lives back in England and eventually America and other places throughout Europe. But at this point in time, it was the 1700s, it was mostly in England. So Monty goes on this grand tour with his sister Felicity, who they're supposed to be dropping off at boarding school, and his best friend Percy, who he's kind of been in love with for the past few years. Monty is definitely a bisexual character, which I thought was awesome to see during this time period, and this book not only handled that representation well, but also had lots of other things that dealt with privilege and different things that were definitely an issue during the 1700s. This book, I don't think it actually says at what point in the 1700s it is. They don't know a lot about modern medicine, and they don't really want women or people of color to have the opportunities that rich white men have. Well, you might think that having a main character such as Monty, who is the said rich white man, would not be good. His privilege is definitely dealt with, and he definitely sees from his traveling companions how lucky he is, and he really realizes what he values in life because of this. They go on an awesome adventure that involves highwaymen and pirates and stealing things, and Monty trying to get laid and kind of messing everything up. But it's overall such a great story. I really loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. The main reason that I took off a star was because it does have some of the miscommunication trope where people could have figured stuff out earlier, but they didn't because of miscommunication. But in this book, I feel like it kind of makes sense. You can really relate to Monty and what kind of character he is, and he's just bad at talking to people. He's really good at talking to people he's trying to seduce, but he's really bad about talking about his actual feelings and what he really thinks. But this book was absolutely amazing, and I'm so looking forward to the next book, which follows his sister Felicity, and apparently has more pirates. The pirates are probably the best people in this book. Like, most definitely the nicest people in this book. Not like the king or anybody, no, it's the pirates. The second book that I read this month was The Whispering Statue, which is a Nancy Drew story. I absolutely love Nancy Drew, as you probably saw if you watched my book haul, because I got 3 of these, and I didn't even add these into the book haul because I didn't have them at that point, but I just bought 4 more Nancy Drew books. So, I'm really ready to read some more Nancy Drew. This one was actually really interesting because Nancy had 2 mysteries to solve, it's like a 2-in-1. She was trying to solve the mystery that's said in the title of The Whispering Statue. It was missing, and there's a big issue of fake art in this, and people who are trying to pass off fake statues and fake paintings as actual art. It sounds kind of boring, but it's actually really fun. These books really help me get out of reading slumps, and really, they're such a good read. My biggest issue with this book is that they changed Nancy's hair color. In every single Nancy Drew book until the 12th one, she has Titan blonde hair, which is stated on the first page of the book. But in this one, she has red hair. That is red. That is very bright. And they say it's strawberry blonde, and I'm no, it's supposed to be Titan blonde hair. This is my biggest issue with this. So those were the 2 books that I read this month, but I do have a pretty ambitious September TBR, and I can say that it's incredibly ambitious considering that I'm starting college. I'm going to be a freshman in college, and it's going to be my first actual month in school, and this is when all the books that I want to read are coming out. So while I am bringing quite a few books with me to college, which you will hopefully see in a different video that will be up soon, there are a lot of books that I do want to buy in September and the rest of the fall because there's so many books that I want to read that are coming out in this month, this upcoming month. I'm so excited. So the first one of those is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. I obviously do not have any of these books, so I'll be just showing a picture on my phone. Particularly, I don't like this cover because it doesn't really go with the rest of the books, but I do understand why she's doing this, because this book is supposed to follow Cole's perspective, which if you've read the series, you know that that is the captain of the guard of the Kingdom of Ardalan. This book is supposed to take place at the exact same time as Empire of Storms, which was the last book, which was released last September, but it's supposed to be taking place on the southern continent, which we really have not seen much of, except for in the novellas that Sarah J. Maas released, which were in the Assassin's Blade. But besides that, we really have not seen that much about it. So we know that Nesryn, who is going to the southern continent with Cole, is somehow related to people on the southern continent. I can't remember if it was her mother or her father, who was originally from the southern continent, but she is going with. But really, we really do not know what to expect. This was supposed to be a novella, similar to the novellas of the Assassin's Blade. But when Sarah J. Maas sat down to write it, she realized that she had so much that she wanted to talk about, just about the southern continent, so much information that she wanted to share with the readers, and so she turned it into a full-length book and pushed back not only the number of the last book, because this technically does count as book number 6, but also pushed back the release date of that book and most of the other books that she is releasing. I think she's releasing some sort of guide to the Throne of Glass world, and also the books that she is releasing following the conclusion of the original trilogy of the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. We really do not want to give any spoilers to anybody who has not read up until Empire of Storms. Cole and Nesryn do go to the southern continent, and they realize that one way to help their friends who are back on the continent on the brink of war, the one way to help them is to get support from the rulers in Antica, which is the stronghold of the Southern Continent's empire. While I was not the biggest fan of A Court of Wings and Ruin, I am really looking forward to this series because I did start reading it first, and it really has a special place in my heart. I really do love this series. I am just worried that it's going to be really long, because that is what happened with the last 2 books that Sarah J. Maas published. They ended up being so long that she made the pages thinner, so the books are actually longer than the books preceding them in the series, but they look way shorter because the pages are really tiny. Something else that is coming out on September 5th, which also features a female assassin, is Godsgrave, which is the second book in the Nevernight series by Jay Kristoff. I think that Nevernight was the first book that I read in this year. I read it I think the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, and I absolutely loved it. It was definitely an adult story and an adult take on this female assassin thing that we have gotten to know in the Throne of Glass universe. This book also has a lot of politics, but really it is a very different story. One thing that I really enjoyed about Nevernight, and this might be something that you would think would be a little annoying, but it wasn't. It was super interesting, is that most of the pages have footnotes. And instead of giving you all the history and backstory of this world in the narrative, Jay Kristoff does this interesting thing where he just puts it in the footnotes instead. So when he mentions something that you don't know about if you haven't read this book yet, he puts it as a footnote. And so you can go down and read about the history, and it's actually super interesting and super funny. There's lots of things that are kind of gory and scary, but they're really interesting, and I really love that part of the book. I don't think I've ever read a book besides a book for school, some sort of reference book that had footnotes in it, and I really loved this. There's another book that is coming out on September 26th, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I really did not know that much about this book before I added it to my TBR shelf on Goodreads. I just knew that some authors that I really liked this book, and so I thought that I would check it out. I really like the cover of it. As you can see, there's some painting aspect to it, which does have to do with the book, because the main character is a prodigy portrait artist, and she paints the Fae. It is a very dangerous job because she doesn't want to do anything wrong, and so she gets her first royal client, who is Rook the Autumn Prince, and she accidentally paints mortal sorrow into his eyes, which he does not like because it will show that he is a weak ruler. So he kind of kidnaps her and takes her to the Fae realm to stand trial for her crime. But apparently some things happen, so they don't actually get to where they're trying to go, and they have to depend on each other for survival. And this unlikely alliance seems like it might develop into something more, which does violate the laws of the fair folk. And so the only choice for them to be able to be together is that Isabel must become one of the fair folk. But that would mean that she would not be able to paint anymore. She would not be this painting prodigy, because that is the price of this immortality. And so Isabel has to choose between her profession and this thing that she loves to do and the man that she loves. And the reason for this is that the fair folk are actually able to feel when they see her paintings. Their mortality is very stagnant, and being able to see these paintings, these beautiful paintings that she does, it changes something about them. And that's another thing that's dangerous, and so they regard her as kind of a threat. And so I'm excited to read this fantasy. I think that it's going to be really cool. I really don't know that much about the Fae. I've only read a few books that include them, and that would be by Cassandra Clare or Sarah J. Maas, and I'm excited to see this other take on them. And so the final book in my September TBR is Hunting Prince Dracula by Kerri Maniscalco. I read the first book to this series, which was Stalking Jack the Ripper, earlier this summer, I believe. I borrowed it from one of my friends, and I had seen it before in the bookstore, and I had picked it up and read a few pages, and it didn't really seem like something for me. It has lots of anatomy in it, because the main character, Audrey Rose, is an anatomy student, and in that book she's trying to solve the murders of Jack the Ripper. And so following the events of those books, her father finally allows her to follow her dream of going to school to study what she loves, and she is going there with her companion from the previous book, Thomas Cresswell. They have amazing chemistry. I love them together. Like, I didn't know if I was going to, and then I really did. This series does not only deal with Jack the Ripper and Prince Dracula and whoever else is going to be the subject of the last book in the trilogy, it also has to do with Sherlock and Watson. In this series, Wadsworth, which is Audrey Rose Wadsworth, is Watson, and Thomas Cresswell is Sherlock. So in the previous book they were trying to solve the murders, and they actually did figure it out. So I'm really interested in what happens in this book, because apparently they end up in the castle of Prince Dracula, and they start seeing murders that seem like they're committed by Dracula himself. I mean, there could be like vampire-like murders, or like the more like Vlad the Impaler sort of thing. Which never makes sense, because where did he get, like, all this, like, the shish kebab things to, like, impale them with? Like, there were so many. Like, I watched this one Dracula movie, and there were, like, way too many. Like, way too many. Too much time on his hands. And so I believe that this book will be a little gory, just like the last one was, but it's going to be super interesting. I remember something that I enjoyed about the last book. It had pictures from the time, and they were things like notes that Jack the Ripper had actually left, or pictures of diseases that were discussed in the book, and just things like that. Things that like an anatomy student would be interested in, and something that you'd be seeing at that moment in time. So despite my apprehension, I really did enjoy that book, and I'm a little nervous about the next book, because I've heard that like the last few scenes are like really gory, and I don't know how well I'm going to be able to handle that. As I mentioned before, the extent to like my like mystery like watching and reading is Scooby-Doo and Nancy Drew. So I don't know if I'm really good at the scary stuff. I know in the last book when you find out who Jack the Ripper is, I was a little... I mean, I know who it was for most of the book. But I was also like, oh god, what is happening? This is awful. And so that is the end of my August wrap-up and July TBR. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, like if you got ARCs, or if you're interested in reading them, or if there are any other books that are coming out in September that you are super excited about. I feel like I might read some of the books that I end up bringing with me to college, but I feel like I should focus on these because I know some of these books are really long, and I don't want to like... And I don't want to say that I'm going to read so many books and not be able to follow through because of school or just because the books are too long. Because Sarah J. Maas's books are like 700 pages now. That is so many pages to read. So thank you for watching.